Good evening. I'm Brian Lewis, and thank you for taking some time out of your schedule this evening to attend tonight's webinar. This is the second part of a two-part series dealing with membership recruitment and retention. For tonight's webinar, we're going to discuss communications, activities, member engagement, and retention. If you have any questions as I'm going through this presentation, please type those into the chat and I'll go through those at the end. If you're watching the recording of this presentation, please type your questions into the comments below so I can look at those and so we can cover them in future videos. I'm going to skip the whole introduction thing. Hopefully you've either seen part one, or if not, I'd encourage you to go back and watch it after this presentation. Part one was about attracting members to our organization. Part two is about keeping them and getting them involved. I'm going to talk a lot about the member experience. It's kind of the new in vogue term, but I rather like it. The description member experience pulls together everything we do, every interaction we have with our members, and everything we provide for them. The experiences of our members is what drives their perception of the organization, and that perception is really what determines whether they stay a member and whether they get actively involved in what we do. We're going to start with communications and spend a lot of time on it because how you communicate with your members has a lot to do with how they perceive your organization. It's very likely that a large majority of your members don't participate. Statistically, most groups are doing great if they can get 20% of their membership to anything once during a year. So your majority doesn't come to meetings, they don't participate in degree work, they don't attend activities. This unseen majority acts, or in this case they don't act, in a very similar manner. They don't show up for anything. But the perception these members have of the organization is not the same. Just because they're not participating doesn't mean they have identical thoughts and feelings about how our organization is doing. And the differences between their perceptions is really, really important. There are many things that are outside of our control, and we can do very little to increase participation of someone who is unable to participate due to outside conflicts such as work or family or medical issues, stuff like that. There is no time nor day for an activity that's going to work for everybody's schedule. Somebody's just not going to be able to make it. We can try our best to be accommodating, but at some point it's beyond our control. All we can do is make sure that they see us positively and they feel welcome to start participating if their situation changes. Now, on the total opposite side of that, there are people who don't participate because they don't feel encouraged, or they feel unwanted, unappreciated, or just uncomfortable being around. And that's a huge problem. That's an issue with the organizational culture, some sort of personality conflict. I am not a counselor, nor am I a psychologist, so I don't have any great answers for the solution to this one. If you think this is a problem, I do know that you need to address it. But there's no quick fix for these kind of personality conflicts, and each group is going to have to figure out their own solution based on their own circumstances. Now, the next two are things that we do have a little bit more control on. First off, we may have people who aren't involved because they're not interested in what we're doing. Now, it could be that the York Rite or Masonry or whatever group we're talking about is just not right for them. Some people are not a good fit for some organizations. It's not them, it's not us, we're just looking for different things. But it could be that what they're interested in is something that we should be providing as an organization. And if that's the case, it is something we can fix by improving our programming and what our activities are. We need to start with what we can control, our own organization, and work on improving what we do. And we'll talk more about activities later. Now, if they're not involved because they've never been asked to, or they don't know what we're doing, or they don't know how to get involved, that is totally our fault. And luckily, it is solvable, which is why we're going to talk a lot now about communications and how to solve that particular problem. I want you to take a moment, and I want you to think about your average member. The one who is not an officer, who doesn't participate in ritual, doesn't show up to your stated meetings. What does he hear from you? Do you communicate with him? When he does receive something, what is it? Does he only receive something when you're asking for money or dues? How does your communications portray the group? As one that's improving or one that's declining? Do they see it as healthy? Do they feel encouraged to come back and help out? Or on the other side, do they feel blamed for not participating and helping? Do they think you're doing a bunch of fun stuff that they wish they could attend or do? Or do they think there's nothing going on? There's a huge difference between the member who gets their annual dues statement and thinks, boy, there was a lot of cool stuff going on last year. Too bad I couldn't make any of it. Maybe I'll try again next year. Or on the other side, the person that says, I don't know what they did. Did they even do anything? I never heard of them. Their perception is going to have a lot more to do with whether they pay their dues than what the actual reality is. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter as much of what we're doing as much as what our members are aware of. One last thing I'd like you to think about. If someone asks one of your less active members about the York Rite, what do you think they'll say about it? Will they say it's a great organization and they wish they had time to participate? Or will they say they're not sure why they joined or that they don't get anything out of it? Are they an advocate saying nice things? Or are they an antagonist who's driving people away and getting them to not even try joining? We're always going to have a certain number of each of those, but we really need to do everything we can to increase the number of advocates we have out there promoting our organizations and our membership. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to involve electronic communications because it really is that important. The majority of our members, they have email and they use that email. They're also frequently on the internet. Not only that, but our younger members have the internet in the palm of their hands. They want to be able to find information instantaneously when they're ready to see it from anywhere. We can make fun of, or we can disapprove of everyone always having their heads down in their phones, and that's true, but that doesn't change the reality that is exactly where people are getting their information from. And if we want to get our information, our communications, our notifications in front of them, it's going to have to come through electronic means, the internet, the web, and probably through a smartphone. And that's just how it's unfortunately going to be whether we like it or not. So it's more important that we adapt to it than try to fight against the tide. There are a number of solutions and providers for everything I'm going to talk about tonight, but I would really recommend getting a Google account for your York Rite, Lodge, whatever group. There are lots and lots of services that you can take advantage of via Google without having a separate account for each of them. It's free, which is typically what our budgets can handle. We don't have a lot of money to spend. And because it's all in one place, there's only one account you need to secure. Multiple people in your group need to have access to everything, or at least be able to get the login information for all your accounts, just in case something happens to the primary user. So only having one username and password with a Google account is a whole lot easier than having a whole bunch of different accounts with a whole bunch of different logins on some huge list, or even worse, you just use the same username and password for everything, and that's a really good way to get hacked, and it's not very secure. So a Google account can solve some problems for you. If you don't like Google, if you want to use their stuff, feel free, but a lot of stuff I'm going to talk about is a Google product because it is free and it is easy to use. So, first off, you really need to have email, and members need to be able to reach you via email. Now, you could certainly use any other email provider, but the key is having an address that is owned by the Yorkite. That way you can promote your email address on everything and be reasonably certain it's not going to change. If you just use, let's say, your secretary's personal email account, then it changes every time you change secretaries. And then you have to reprint everything and change everything with that email address on it. With a Gmail account, you won't have to change anything, and access can be rotated around to whomever is going to be in charge of emails. And the person in charge can change as often as you need it to be. With most email services, but definitely with a Gmail account, you can forward those emails to whoever's watching its personal account. So then they don't have to remember to check another account or log into anything else. It just comes to one place. As secretary of my Yorkite, all the Yorkite's emails are just forwarded to me, and they all drop into my personal inbox, and so I see them every time I check my own email. The other nice thing, though, is if I go on vacation, I can change who it's forwarded to. Or I can let someone else log in and check it while I'm gone. I certainly wouldn't let somebody log into my personal email account to look for Yorkite emails, but it's not an issue at all to have them check the Yorkite's Google account. Also, it doesn't really matter who checks the email as long as the members are getting a prompt response. The secretary does make sense in a lot of cases, but if you have a secretary who doesn't check his email frequently and you have a senior officer that does, let them manage the email account, no problem. Or appoint an assistant secretary that's good at handling email correspondence and let him do it. All that really matters is that members, prospects, whoever is able to reach out you via email. They know how, i.e. what address to use, and that address isn't changing all the time. And they know that when they reach out to you, they will get a response. Now here we're talking about receiving messages and responding to questions. Now we're going to talk about pushing email out to the membership, which is actually quite a bit different. My first advice for sending emails out to members is to really put some thought into what you're sending and think about how you can connect with your membership using email. What do you want to communicate to them about? Well, you probably want to tell them about upcoming events. Great. So make sure when you tell them about upcoming events that all the details are in that email. Do your members know how to participate in your organization? Have you told them why they would even want to? Make sure that kind of information there. If you're looking for volunteers, make sure to be detailed about that. The other thing to think about when you're constructing your emails is, will they feel like they know what's going on by reading the emails? And what is their perception of the group going to be from those emails? Now, frequency is a really tricky subject that I'm going to dabble on here. Because first off, you need to be consistent. If they get, let's say, 7 emails all at once in 1 week, and then they don't hear from you for months, that's terrible. Don't do that. But if they get too many emails on a very consistent basis, over time they may get annoyed and they may unsubscribe or click your emails as spam or just delete them without reading. Obviously not good. But if you don't send them enough email, then we're not keeping them engaged and informed, and we're missing opportunities to get them involved with our groups. One rule of thumb that I use with all the groups I manage their email for is never to send the same email or the same subject line twice in a row. I need to have enough different content to be able to rotate what I'm promoting and what I'm talking about. And a lot of times this has the added bonus of pointing out to me when we're not doing a lot and when we need to start adding some activities. If there's nothing new, then it's probably time to do stuff. My recommendation is for anyone just starting out with an email program is to, at the very least, send something monthly, but really look at working that up to about once a week. Unless you have a ton of activity, more than once a week is normally overkill and will have people clicking on the unsubscribe. Now, also keep in mind that you do need to send a decent amount of emails, which is why I think once a month is not enough long term, because frankly, people are not going to read every email you send. There's a certain frequency that's needed to get in front of them. If you use a service provider for your emails, you'll get open and click rates, and you'll be able to get a feel for like who opens and when and how often. Not to discourage anyone, but a 25% open rate is really good. I have a couple groups that in the low 20s is my normal. I actually have one client I work with that I'm always shocked that it's in the high 30s and low 40s, which is really impressive. It may not sound that way, but it is. Most groups would kill for that kind of viewership. So a certain amount of duplication and frequency is going to be necessary. Now, you can just send these emails out from this Gmail or whatever email account you send out. If you do, you need to make some extra effort focused on making sure that your emails look professional and like they're coming from an organization and not just somebody's buddy who pounded out a few things on their keyboard and spent about 5 minutes thinking about it and then hit send. It needs to look like it's coming from a group. Also, you got to keep in mind, it's an organizational email. It's not a personal email. So you need to respect people people who don't want to receive them and ask to unsubscribe. And unfortunately, you've got to track all that. Another thing to keep in mind is just because someone gives your Rite or your organization their email address when they sign up, that does not mean they've given you permission to share their email address with every single member in your organization. So, you really need to blind carbon copy, BCC those emails you send out, so that everybody on the email doesn't know every single email address for every single person in the group. The other reason you need to do that, and I really hate to say this, but I don't know why people really struggle with when it is appropriate to hit reply all. But there is nothing more frustrating than getting a bunch of reply alls to an email you didn't send or really didn't have anything to do with that are just a bunch of thanks for the information and that kind of stuff. So you can solve a lot of those problems by blind carbon copying your emails. I also want to just point out that we're very lucky that we are where we're at, and we don't have a lot of email privacy rules in the U.S. yet. If we were in Europe, we'd be dealing with GDPR rules. And I just have this feeling that as time goes and email volume increases, this kind of data privacy issues are going to keep popping up. And yes, I think they will even affect lodges and York Rites and fraternal groups. So you probably should just start thinking now in terms of how to protect your members' privacy. It may seem hard at first, but setting up an email service provider is really a lot quicker in the long run and will solve some of these problems I'm talking about. There are tons of email service providers. All of them do very similar stuff. They'll help you make your emails look better. They'll have a professional format and a template that make it look like it's not coming from an individual, but it's coming from an organization. They will do list management, so they will manage your email bounces and your unsubscribes and all that fun stuff. I love the fact that you can write emails in advance and then schedule them to go out. So when I have time, I can sit down and prep a bunch of emails, but I don't have to send them all at the same time, and I can prepare them in advance, especially when I know I'm going to be busy, so they still come out on a regular schedule. The nice thing about most of these service providers is for small groups, which pretty much includes all of what we're talking about, you can normally find something that's free. I'm not going to mention the really popular service provider, even though it's the one I'm using for my York Rite, because frankly, they really screwed me over with a client and incorrectly changed their services for a free account and decided not to fix it at all when I brought it to their attention. My personal opinion is they are a ticking time bomb, and I'm just waiting to figure out exactly what I want to do before I move my York Rite over to something else, because I don't want to choose wrong and have to do it a second time. The client, however, I had the challenges with, I moved them over to a provider called MailerLite, MailerLite. I have been using them for a couple months now, and I'm pretty happy with them. I haven't used it long enough to give you a full glowing recommendation, but if you're looking for somewhere to start with sending out emails to membership, I would say Google MailerLite and give them a try. Their free plan is for under 1,000 contacts, so that should pretty much count everybody. Next. I must have bumped it. All right. It is strongly encouraged that you have a presence on the internet. A first and easy place to start is with a calendar. If you have a Google account, setting up a calendar is pretty easy. The key with having a calendar is having all the information out there. So if a member wants to know what meetings or activities are coming up, they can find it themselves, and they can find the details. Keeping in mind that over 90% of our members under the age of 50 have a smartphone, so they are able to access this information from anywhere. So I really recommend having a calendar, making your members aware of it, because most of them will be able to get to it and use it. You can certainly use providers other than Google. The big key, however, is accessibility. Can you sync with most smartphones? I don't know that with all other service providers. I do know with a Google Calendar, it can be synced with a standard Android calendar and on the iPhone. In fact, my wife and I have a joint Google Calendar so that she can see it on her iPhone and I can see it on my Samsung, and it makes it really helpful for us to be on the same page and know what we're doing and no double bookings and bad problems. Masonic groups are no different. If I can overlay their calendars on top of mine, then I can see potential conflicts coming up. It helps with scheduling. It lets me know when I'm busy. It also makes event information very accessible. If I see something on my calendar, I should be able to then click on it and see all the details. details and know exactly what that event involves. The other advantage to posting events on a calendar is it forces us to list out all those details of who, what, when, and where, and it keeps it all organized in a standard format. It's a lot easier for me to look at a calendar entry and pick out the information I need because it's always all in similar or the same places, rather than when you get these posts where it's a big paragraph of text trying to list out all the who, what, when, where, why, and all that. The calendar just makes it a whole lot easier. All right, while a calendar is great and easy to start with, a website is really what you want to get to. As our membership and our prospects continue to trend towards the younger generations, the Gen X's, the millennials who are all starting to hit their 30s and then some, and even Gen Z, it becomes more and more important to have a web presence. It's weird to think about, but anyone under the age of 30 doesn't even remember when we didn't have the internet. For so many people, the first thing we do when we hear about something that we're interested in or something we'd like to learn more about is we just pick up our phones and we Google it. So the question is, can you be found on Google? And if you can be, what will people learn about you? If they Google your Rite, your lodge, or whatever. Your website is really your online bulletin board. It's your official presence on the internet. You really need it, and you really need to have good, up-to-date content. Starting a website is pretty easy. There are tons of service providers, but yet again, I am going to continue my Google promotion and start out by recommending Google Sites. Because it gets the job done, it's free, and if you're already using Google, you have an account and it'll tie everything together. A Google site will set you up with this long address string that starts with sites.google.com/site/ and then the name of whatever Google account you set up. And that works. It's not the prettiest, and it's not the easiest to put on business cards and tell people about. To get a domain name, to pick your own www. something, you'll need to go and register one. GoDaddy is the well-known provider for this service. It's what I've used. I've never had any problems with it. They're pretty easy. They're pretty cheap. I believe the last time I paid for it, it's like $12 a year for us to register www.pratheryorkrite.com. And as an added bonus with that package, I got info@pratheryorkrite.com as an email address, which I just forward to our Gmail account, so it all comes to me. So for $12 a year, that seems like a pretty worthwhile investment. There's a lot of stuff that you can put on your website and a lot of ways to do it. I am a form over substance person. I would much rather have good, organized information that looks clean and straight than make it overly pretty. So if you visit our website, I wouldn't call it the most attractive, but I think it gets the job done. The big key is, though, making sure that it looks clean, it's up to date, and it projects a positive impression of your organization. Most providers, such as Google Sites, have some sort of interface that will let you set it up without knowing any HTML or coding. It may not look like a professional did it, but you can certainly set up something that looks organized and will give you a good web presence, whether or not you have any web design training. So what needs to be there? Contact information. You need to be able to make sure people can find you. You need to try to anticipate what questions people might ask and have the answers available. Members are likely to ask about upcoming events, so event details, that's probably a good idea. You need to have information for prospects. Let them know who you are, what you do, why they should be interested in joining or learning more. If they are interested in joining, how do they join? How do they learn more about joining? What's all that process? Show members and prospects what you do. Are you having fun? If you are, show them. You'll be surprised how many people will visit your website. So other things like member recognition. We list on our website all our past presiding officers, all our award winners, all the awards our bodies have won, all that kind of stuff. I would argue that more people see that online than probably will ever see some plaque we put up in the lodge hall. We get a couple hundred web hits a month, whereas, 30, 40 people walk through the lodge a month, maybe. So this kind of stuff I think is really useful to letting people know that you're active, you're doing things. Just the mere fact of having your officer list up to date shows you're paying attention to your communication and what you're showing people. Having outdated information gives the impression that you're disorganized. Having no information is even worse. So having stuff up there that's up to date is a big positive. What your website needs to be is a composite and a snapshot of all your communications. Unlike email, your website is passive. Members have to come to you in order for you to get information on your website out in front of them. So a website, while I think is really important, it is not the solution your communication needs because it's not an active way to push stuff out. But I do think it is an amazing way to passively have all your information available for anyone who's looking at it. Speaking of passive and making information available, let me talk real quick about my good friend Google Docs. I am a huge fan of Google Docs. Again, it is free with a Google account, and what it does is it provides an easy way to store and share files of any type. Now, part of the Google Docs platform is it allows you to create files such as documents, spreadsheets, PowerPoints, and a few other things. Because it is tied into your Google account, it's a great way to save files where multiple people can get at them so nothing gets lost if somebody leaves or something happens to somebody. Instead of a file being on someone's personal computer where you may never get to them if something happens, everything on your Google Doc drive is part of the organization's archive. So you can save historical documentation, information, pictures, stuff like that, so they're never ever lost. The documents are editable in real time. What does that mean? Well, what it means is I can send you a link to a Google Doc, something like, let's say, an agenda or a cast list. And if you click on that link, you will always get the most recent, most up-to-date version. The problem with attachments when we send out PDFs or Word docs or spreadsheets is controlling what version people are looking at and making sure everyone has the most up-to-date information. With Google Docs, I can go in, I can change a cast assignment for the upcoming degree cycle, and everyone who clicks on that document link immediately after I make the change will see the new assignment. So I can always know that everyone has the most up-to-date information. Another thing we do at the end of our dues collection cycle is I'll send out an NPD list to all the officers on a Google Doc. And as soon as someone pays their dues, I can delete them from that doc immediately, and everyone will know exactly who at this moment I have as not paying their dues. And so they never have to worry about, is this document a week old? Is someone paid in the last week and we haven't gotten a new document? No, it's up to date. pretty much as soon as I receive it, it gets updated. So they can feel a lot more confident when they're making their communications. Tons and tons of other planning can be done on Google Docs with multiple people being able to edit the same document at the same time and everyone seeing the same thing. Strongly recommend looking at how you can use Google Docs. I use this for all my clients. My Rite uses it a ton. It's a wonderful service. Alrighty, phone number. I absolutely hate the phone. Everyone that knows me knows that I absolutely hate the phone. But I do acknowledge that some people want to be able to call and talk to somebody. So the solution, not surprisingly, yet again, is Google. Google Voice is a service that I'm guessing that most of you are not aware of. It's a little more obscure. What Google Voice will do is you can get a phone number for free, and it is attached to your Google account. So if your Rite has a Google account, that number is your Rite's permanent phone number. It's not an individual's. And this is really key because just like with the email, if you use the secretary's cell phone number, then you have to change that number every time you change secretaries. It also means that he's the only one that gets the phone calls. He's the only one that can answer it. Using Google Voice, it's your permanent number. And what I love about it is it can be assigned to forward to any other number. So while I absolutely hate answering the phone, I have another wonderful member of the Rite who is willing to take care of all the phone calls for me. And so if someone calls the number that's listed on our website for the Rite, it will go to his cell phone. When he answers the call, it'll let him know that it is a forwarded call from the Rite. So he can make the decision of answering it and knowing he's talking to someone about the Rite, or he has the option of pushing it to voicemail if he's busy and doesn't have time to deal with Rite stuff. So that's the other bonus. It gives you a voicemail box also, so people can leave you messages. If someone leaves a voicemail, what will happen is an email will go out to your Gmail account with a link to the recording, and it'll try to do a transcript. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, but it sends all that out. And so if there's multiple people watching the Google or the Gmail account, multiple people can see that there was a voicemail, and it all doesn't have to fall on one person. This is another Google service that can do some really cool stuff. I actually had not played with it in years, and I looked at it a little bit before setting up this presentation, and it's got some really neat stuff, and so I would really recommend looking into it. Having a phone number is great for letting members contact you, but again, that's passive communication, so we need to also talk about active communication, and this is reaching out to our members by the phone. Phone trees are falling by the wayside because more and more people and more of your officers just flat out don't want to make phone calls because, frankly, they don't want to answer the phone either, or they don't want to be on the phone. I'm coming across this a lot more lately, and I try to be neutral, but I'm kind of for it because I don't like phone calls myself. A lot of this does depend, though, on the culture, the demographics, and the individual personalities of your active members and the groups you're working with. Every group has a different personality. But just understand that if your officers don't want to make phone calls, forcing them is just a real good way to lose volunteers and not a real great way to accomplish anything. There are other ways to solve this particular problem. Calling services are the solution to getting information out via the phone without a whole lot of effort. It does cost a little bit, about 3 cents per person per call. But for 3 cents a call, problem solved. Again, there's a number of services who do this. We've used Calling Post. We liked it. We just got away from it because it just didn't seem to do very much for us, and it wasn't as effective as email and social media. But again, I think that's more of a cultural thing with our group. I know there are other Yorkites, other lodges, other groups that have found these kind of services really valuable. So if your members are big on receiving phone calls, definitely look into this. The other two websites I listed are ones that our Grand Lodge had recommended a couple years back. I did take a brief look at all three websites. The pricing seems pretty comparable with all three, so I'm not sure there's a huge difference. Pick one, give it a try. If you think your members will respond well to phone call meetings and event reminders, this is definitely something you should be looking into. Alrighty, let's dabble in the vast realm of social media. I say dabble because social media, one, is vast and broad, and I could spend hours talking about social media. The other problem with social media is it changes fast. Whatever I say here, especially if I went into any details or specifics, is likely to change really quick. All the major ones continually are updating how they do things. When we're talking about social media, the first thing is that there's tons and tons of platforms. No group really has the time or resources to do all of them or even figure out what all of them are. So whatever you do decide to do, just make sure to do it well. Your volunteers just only have so much time, so you just can't be posting on everything. Facebook certainly is the big one out there. The stats I found on the web are that 69% of the U.S. population is on Facebook. I'm not a real big Facebook fan, but on the other hand, I also realize that a lot of my members are on Facebook, and a lot of them, for reasons that I do not understand, prefer to get their information via Facebook rather than emails or other communications. So that's where the people are, so that's where our posting is. If you decide to set up something on Facebook, when you go to set it up, you're going to have to make one decision up front, and that's whether you want a page or a group. My recommendation is that you go with a page, and I'm going to explain why. Groups are set up for discussions and conversation. Pages are set up to be big old bulletin boards. You cannot advertise anything you post on a group. So if you're going to want to use Facebook for your recruitment, you'll absolutely need a page. Now, the downside of that is not everyone can post to your page. Only the moderators you select can post to the wall. That may also be a benefit, because some of the problem with groups is that every single group member can post, and sometimes people post things that don't make us look good, or even if they're not doing it intentionally, they post stuff that just looks messy and just doesn't give the perception that we want. Me personally, I very much appreciate the control that the page gives me, so I can make sure that our messaging is appropriate, it's professional, I can look through it and make sure that everything people see is stuff that is clean and appropriate and just it's the right stuff, and we're not getting weird marketing stuff and people trying to sell stuff and spam and things off topic. Now, the downside of the page is you really can't see who is following your page, and you can't really prevent them from seeing your posts like you can with the group. Now, I would argue that Facebook is a terrible, terrible place for anything that you don't want to be public. But they've tried to create these groups to give an opportunity for people to talk privately, in quotes, with people on Facebook. Okay. I would stick with pages and keep everything that you're happy with anyone seeing. Do keep in mind, though, that everything I've just said is subject to change, and it probably will. I remember when they changed groups. I remember when we had to switch our York Rite from a Facebook group to a Facebook page because they changed what we can do, and it will not shock me when they change them again. The other big one is Twitter. What you'll find with Twitter is you'll have a much smaller audience. There aren't as many people on Twitter, and I don't get the feel that our membership demographic is as active on Twitter, so I don't feel like I get as many impressions and views. But the advantage of Twitter is it's also a whole lot easier to set up. You just create an account, you name it something appropriate, you type in a little bit of what you do, and you're good to go and make posts. What I like about Facebook is I can create posts and schedule them for when I want them to drop. So again, I can do the work when I have time, and it can drop when I'm busy, but when I want it to drop. What I don't like about Twitter is the opposite of that, is that Twitter will not let me schedule tweets. I have to use a third-party service. What I use is called Hootsuite, Hootsuite. Hootsuite is free for up to like 3 accounts and scheduling like 30 posts at a time. It's more than enough for just one Twitter. It works. It's fine. It's just a little annoying to have to do everything in 2 different places and monitor all the stuff. While I do think Facebook is more effective than Twitter, I will say that I have noticed in the last few months that I definitely have a certain small minority segment of my membership that only responds when I send out Twitter posts. So since I am getting responses and I do get activity off of them, we're going to keep doing Twitter. But Facebook definitely is much more effective. There are also tons and tons and tons of other social media platforms that I have not used for any Masonic groups. I love LinkedIn for professional organizations. The stuff I do for my day job, LinkedIn, I've done some great advertising. But I don't think it works as well for fraternal groups. The targeting is set up to target people based on their what college degree they have or what their job title is or what company they work for. None of that really helps me in Masonic stuff. So I just don't see a whole lot of use for it. Also, it's really a professional networking, and it just doesn't seem quite as appropriate to post a bunch of Masonic stuff. So I don't do anything with LinkedIn. Instagram is all about pictures. If you want to get on Instagram, you got to have a lot of pictures or you got to create a lot of graphics. I have not a lot of either, so I just haven't dabbled in that yet. Plus, we're all limited by our volunteers, and at this point, we're kind of at our capacity with what we can do on communication, so we pretty much stick to Facebook and Twitter. I would be very interested if anyone else has had any success on any of the many, many other platforms, just to see what people have done and how they've used it. If you're going to do stuff on social media, you've got to do it. You got to do it actively. You've got to do it regularly. Multiple posts a week are really needed if you want to get in front of people and have them pay attention to what you're posting. Please, please make sure whatever you post is a positive reflection of your group. Typos happen. I do typos. I misspell stuff. It's annoying. I get them fixed. But the number of posts I see with just horrible, incomprehensible grammar, lack of punctuation, no capitalization or all capitalized, or just stuff like that, oh my, it is really depressing. If we want people to perceive us and our organizations as these educated pillars of the community, our posts have got to reflect that. So whatever you post, make them look good, make them stay on topic. One other thing to remember about social media is It's not just about recruiting people to come to events. It's not just about getting people interested in your organization. It's showing everybody who we are, what we do, and when we post something, it is there for a very, very long time. Someone can go back to your page and scroll through your posts for years and just see what you've been doing. So the question there is, if they scroll through all your posts, what do they think about you? If you start dabbling with social media and then you stop, they're going to scroll through and see this huge gap. What kind of impression will that give them of you? Does that mean you just didn't do anything for 9 months, or that nobody cared enough to post anything? I understand that that's not the case normally. It's normally our volunteers got busy. But the perception from outsiders, prospects, even members, when they see you don't care enough to keep your Facebook page up to date, that is not a positive impression. It also reflects what you have going on. So if all you're posting is stated meetings coming up, then the impression is all you do is stated meeting. If you don't post stuff about degree work or activities or education or other stuff, that's all whatever you post going to form the impression. So think about what that looks like to someone from the outside. Okay. Well, it's definitely a little bit more important with social media because it gets in front of prospects, non-members, the public. I want to reiterate what I've just said about making sure everything you communicate, you just need to think about what it says about your York Rite, your lodge, your group, whatever. As I mentioned in the opening, the perception of your members has a lot of importance. So what perception does your communications communicate? Now, if you don't send anything, you're communicating that you don't do anything. If you send too many communications, especially on the same topic, you're communicating that you're desperate. We don't want to communicate that we're desperate either, even if it is true. Don't act desperate. Think about how everything is worded. There's a big difference between, we're looking forward to a great stated meeting on Monday night, and boy, we'd love to see you there, versus, please come on Monday night so we can have enough people to open our meeting. A little extreme. Maybe nobody do that. But I have seen things. Actually, I saw a couple things on Facebook just this afternoon where I don't think the person writing it thought about how outsiders or non-active members would read it. And I think it comes across and gives perception of lack of activity, lack of involvement, lack of interest in what we're doing. We don't want to do that. Along with that, don't write in an emotional state to your membership. If you're mad that no one volunteered for the cast, keep that to yourself. If no one's volunteering to help out, it's legitimate to address that with the officers. If you're going to send a mad email, send that to your officers. But don't send it out to the entire membership. And certainly don't air your dirty laundry on Facebook so the public and everyone can see it. And we've all seen those posts. Don't do it. Just don't do it. And then again, just make sure they're well written and they look like people are putting time and effort into what they're doing. And think about, are they telling people what they need to know? Is it really something they want to know? Mistakes get made, but try to avoid forgetting vital information like when and where an event's happening and all those stuff. Because if not, then you're asking them, I want to tell you about an event and I want to get you interested in it, but you're not going to be able to do anything because you don't have all the information. So you're going to have to email me back to get more information. And hopefully I'll be quick to respond, or you may just lose interest really quick and that's it, we're done. got to have all the info there. And then on the other side, on the passive communication, when people reach out to you, what does that look like? We're all volunteers, so hopefully everyone understands our immediate response is not a realistic expectation. You're not going to get your phone call returned in 5 minutes, and you may not get your email responded to within a day. Sometimes real life comes up. But do they get a response reasonably quick? And then when they get that response, is that response friendly? Do we act like we're happy that they contacted us, or do we act like they're wasting our time? You'd think I wouldn't have to say that, but I've seen stuff. And then again, is the content we're sending back informative and helpful? Is it what they needed? Here's a checklist of all the communication channels I've mentioned and the order that I would tackle them. You can certainly jump around if you think something will appeal more to your members. To me, I think it's a lot more work with a lot less return on my time to be playing around on Facebook than sending out weekly emails. But maybe your members love Facebook and Facebook will work better than emails. It's possible. Maybe you think your members will respond to phone calls more than emails, then by all means, get signed up with a calling service and start sending out some phone calls. But just this is the stuff that I think time and money, I get the most bang for my buck the higher it is on that list. The other thing you may have noticed is I have neglected to talk about mailed and print pieces. That is because it is expensive, especially compared to everything on this list. It's also time consuming. Anyone who's folded due statements and printed and done all that knows how much time it takes. And it's hard to get it out quickly, so it's hard to get information out on a timely basis. And so I just don't feel like it's a great return on investment, both for the money and the volunteer time that's put into it. There's some things like due statements that I got to mail. If I don't mail them out, some people aren't going to pay their dues. And I guess if you're doing great at everything on this list, maybe a mailing strategy will help you keep improving your communication success. Maybe you can hit those few people you aren't. But for the money and the time, I think this list will generate you better results. I'm sorry, and I know that there's always going to be that one member who doesn't do things electronically and they only do it by mail. But we've got to do the things that get in front of our largest percentage of our membership. And it goes all the way to the other side that I know there's some newfangled social media stuff that our newer members really like, and I'm not doing that either because I don't have the time for it, and it just isn't going to get in front of a large enough percentage. We really have to focus on what do we get for the money and the time we put into it and try to get in front of the largest segment we can as effectively as possible. So building a bridge between talking about communications and talking about events. One more item to bring up on the electronic service providers is online ticket services. These are services that let you take RSVPs online or even let you sell tickets. What I also like about these is similar to setting up stuff on the Google Calendar is that they help you remember to include all the important information and they lay everything out for you in a professional manner. Each event is its own web page, which gives me something that I can link to in emails and on social media, so anyone that's interested can click on that link and find all the information. I don't want to type out every detail about every event in some big long paragraph of text in every email or Facebook post I send out, but I need that information to be findable by anyone who is interested. So this, using a ticketing service, really helps me do that while keeping everything uniform and looking nice. I am currently using both of them at the top here, Eventbrite and TicketLeap. But there's also tons and tons of these also. Eventbrite is definitely the industry leader. but they up their pricing, so it's really too expensive for me to use them for paid events with small fees, because anytime we're charging for anything, it's like 10 or 15 bucks, and the fees are way too high for that. For free events, though, it doesn't cost us anything. It works great. Ticket Leap, I found them because they have smaller fees, so I switched all our paid events over to them. They're great also. If I didn't have such a large archive of past events in Eventbrite, I might have switched everything over to have it all in the same place, but either way, they're both free. If you're not charging, they both work really well. Either one's fine. My advice is just if you do anything outside free events, keep a close eye on the service charges, just to make sure you know what you're paying. Alrighty, so you want to be more active. You want your group to do more stuff. How? And what do we do? And how do we select those activities? The most crucial thing is to talk with your members, especially the members that are already active. And that may sound counterintuitive, but your active members and your officers are the ones that are going to have to run these activities. It doesn't matter what activities you come up with. If no one active wants to host them, no one wants to do them, it's not going to happen. But hopefully there's something that the people that show up to all your meetings would like to do, and that you can use to try to draw in some more people to get involved with those activities. Part of this is continuing to get a better understanding of your membership. You're never going to truly understand everything about the people who are members, but you always want to be building that knowledge in terms of who are they? What do they like to do? Surely some of your officers will know some of the members who don't show up and can provide you some insight on their hobbies and interests. You can also conduct a survey of your membership. Just be warned. Just because someone says on a survey that they want to do something does not mean that they want to do it enough to show up. A lot of times we do things because members say they want us to do it, and then we get mad because hardly anyone participates. And I've actually had this professionally where we do surveys on what topic would you like at our next event. And by golly, we go straight off that survey and sometimes nobody shows up because while they're interested, they're not interested enough to pay the event fees and take time off work or get boss approval to come to them. And it's the same thing here. So this is why I really do think it's important. Start with your officers and active members and start with things that they'd like to do anyway and start building it from there. It's a whole different situation if I personally run an event that I want to do. If I only get a small crowd, oh well, I wanted to do this anyway, we're going to have a good time, it's not a problem. But if you run something that you didn't really want to do and then nobody shows up, then everybody's just mad and depressed about it. So try to avoid that. Second thing, going back to surveys, please keep in mind survey bias. Your survey results are based on whoever responds to your survey. This seems like a common sense point, but sometimes we forget this with surveys, and we forget to consider who is filling out the survey. Because what normally happens is our active members are more likely to fill out the survey and our inactive members don't fill it out, or you get a really small response rate. So what ends up happening is you really still don't know what they're interested in. Now, this may sound like I'm negative survey. I'm not. I enjoy surveys. I like doing them. I just know to take them with a grain of salt. Actions speak a lot louder than words or surveys. So look more closely at what is generating activity and participation and try to build on that stuff. Oh, and by the way, Google Docs also has an option for forms that you can use to create free online surveys. So look at those Google Docs. All right, brainstorming events. I'm going to throw out some ideas for activities. Some of these are going to be great ideas. Some of these may sound like horrible ideas. Some of these don't even sound like good ideas for me, but I know that other groups have been successful with them, because part of the challenge here is that what works for my Yorkite will not work for every Yorkite, because my Yorkite has different people, different personalities, different interests than your Yorkite does. So I'm going to keep putting stuff out here, and then you've got to kind of figure out for yourself what you think will work for your audience. So let's kick this off. Social events in general. What I'm talking about with social events are, what do you do for fun anyway that you can invite other people to come join you with? So one of my big hobbies is board gaming. I love board games. So I run a monthly board game event through the Yorkite. I want a board game anyway, so it's not really any extra effort on my part, but it does give us an activity, and we get some members to come out, and I get to meet some people and get to know them a little better, and it gives new members an opportunity to come out and hang out with us. It's great. Other people do other things. I have one particular member who has a wide and vast knowledge of Indiana breweries, and he will set up events at said breweries. People like to try craft beer. We'll go out and hang out and try some craft beer. We have a handful of members who like to participate in 5Ks. So we'll run a 5K event and get a small group together to run a 5K. I'm not athletic enough to do it, but I've actually done it once. It was fine. Things like that. Just think about what your hobbies are, and can you turn it into an event? And kind of multitask. Get some Masonic friends, some Yorkite friends involved. Second one is family events, which are very, very similar to social events. This is stuff that really is aimed at children or the entire families of our members. We've done stuff like putt-putting. We're getting ready to do an ice skating event in a couple months. Things like that. The only caution I want to make with family events is and when I say we, Masonic groups, Yorkite, we will never be the best at family events. There is so much competition. There are so many groups that are aimed specifically at kids, our D-Malays, Jobs, the Boy Scouts, stuff like that. There are so many sporting activities now that are so high maintenance. Churches have a bunch of youth activities. Schools are doing more after school. I've talked to a couple principals about, they just do stuff that I don't remember doing. Maybe I'm just getting old, but I don't remember us doing as much back then. So I think family events are great. Just understand that someone else is probably doing it better. So I would not recommend hanging your hat on family events. But when you have the opportunity, do them. They're great. And we've had good success with a few of them. Table meetings. Anything that involves a meal can be turned into an event. That can also be social. One of the cool things we came up with a couple years ago is when we do table meetings, we have scripted introductions so people don't get off on tangents and long-winded and tell us actual things about themselves that are interesting and stuff that we would like to know. So there's good ways to use. Breaking bread and being social is fun anyway. So utilizing table meetings is always a great idea. Next one, educational events. We keep hearing that Masons want more education, and I do believe that. I don't think education always has to be done the same way, though. I think a lot of times we think of education as having someone come in and give a 30-minute presentation at the end of a stated meeting or something like that. There's all kinds of other things we can do with education, from getting together to discuss stuff or having a research group. I mean, presentations are fine also, but I think there's a lot of other things we can do with education and kind of get outside of that box. Co-sponsored events. We don't have to do this all by ourselves. There are other groups that need events, and they need people to come to those events, and we can partner with them. So the example I'm going to use is my York Rite does a joint picnic with my lodge. So what we do every year is we do the picnic. The lodge brings the food. The York Rite brings the beverages because we're allowed to do that. And we have a good old time, and we get probably 30 people to show up. It's a nice co-sponsored event and gets everybody together. So co-sponsored events, great idea. Partner with the lodge you're meeting with. Partner with somebody else. Do stuff together. Most of us are involved in so many groups, we don't have time to go to every event that every group has. So kind of be able to multitask and go to my lodge and my York Rite at the same time. It's kind of nice that way. Now, similar but not the same is the piggyback events. This is where you take a big event that's going on and you piggyback on it. So my example of this one is the Indiana Grand Council does a crypt rededication. They have this really cool crypt monument at Indiana Council number 1 down in southern Indiana. And every year they do this big weekend where I think the joke is only the Grand Council can take a 30-minute ceremony and turn it into a full weekend event of events. And there's some truth to that, but it's a fun event. So for the last, it's been a long time, 8 to 10 years, what Prather York Rite's done is we'll go down for the crypt rededication and we'll do the crypt ceremony. This year we did some great Masonic education, and then we split off and do our own thing. And we go visit the grave site of Calvin W. Prather, who our lodge and our York Rite's named after. And we'll go to the grave site and we'll give a little bit of history about Prather and make sure everybody knows who he is. And then we'll go out as our own group to lunch and we'll just hang out. And then at the end of the day, we'll go back to the hospitality suite, and Grand Council runs a big fundraiser event, and we'll help them raise some CMMRF money. So we're able to we get to help their event have more people and kind of do our own thing, and it's worked really well, I think, for everybody. Next one, visitations. Here's where we're getting the stuff that I don't see my York Rite doing, but I know other York Rites have enjoyed, and you may enjoy it also. Visitations, going to other York Rites to visit them for degree work and get to meet other Masons and other people. That's a great idea. It gives you something to do, gives you an opportunity to go talk to some new people and get out of your rut. So visitations are definitely something to consider. Charitable or fundraising events. We have tons of Masonic charities. All of them want money from us. If there's a fun way to raise money for them, and your members are passionate about raising said money for them, well, this is a good way to combine an activity with some good service. And then along with that, community events or parades. I know commanderies love to parade, so there's certainly opportunities there. But there's also opportunities for piggybacking again on community events. Stuff that's happening in your town or city. Some of it may be to get in front of people and let them know we exist, but some of it may just be, hey, the town's doing this really cool thing. We should support them and show up, and we'll make it a York Rite event also, and kind of multitask them. And then last but not least, drill team. If you have members that are interested in drilling, practicing drill is a great way for people to get to know one another. Same camaraderie you build when you talk about sports teams. So drill team is another good activity. Again, though, it's if your members are interested in it. You got to have 7 people to do a D team who want to do it. But if you have them, do it. All right, I am going to now move along to volunteer participation. This is a topic for a webinar on its own, so I am just going to skim over volunteer stuff, but it's too vital to not cover it as part of a retention webinar. Here are some of the keys to volunteer participation. First off, clear expectations. What do you want people to do? You're not going to get a bunch of people to just say, yeah, I want to help out with whatever you need help with. That's like signing a blank check. Who signs a blank check? They're not going to do that. A lot of times we say we need help. but we really don't know what we need help with. And then we get mad because no one volunteers to help out with something that we're not even able to define ourselves. Because often we really don't know what we need help with. What we know is that the people who are volunteering, our officers, are getting worn out and they're getting tired and they need help. But we got to be able to tell people what that help is. We also have a bad habit of saying, we want officers, but we don't know how to explain to people what being an officer means. We just tend to want officers because we need officers, and we have lines on a sheet and holes to fill that need names put next to them. But we can't explain why someone would want to do it or what we're asking them to do. And we don't acknowledge that not everybody wants to be an officer. Some people only have a little bit of time to volunteer. How can we let those people contribute? If you only got a little bit of time, they can't help because we only need a lot of time volunteers. Sometimes we get a little bitter at people who aren't willing to volunteer hours and hours every week. Like this is the only commitment they have. I mean, for goodness sakes, most of us have multiple Masonic commitments, not to mention all our family and work and other group commitments. There's tons of stuff going on. So sure, if you're going through line, if you're going to be a presiding officer, yes, a time commitment is necessary. But for those who can't or don't want to do that, we need to really think about what we have for them to do. The trendy term right now is micro-volunteer opportunities, and it's being trendy because people don't want long-term commitments. They want short little tasks that they can help out with. So we need to provide ways for people to volunteer who have various levels of commitment, and we also need to consider various skill sets. If someone isn't good at or doesn't like ritual, does that mean they can't volunteer? Couldn't we use their help for something else? And if so, where? We end up with lots and lots and lots of ritualists as our volunteers and officers because that is the easiest place to find jobs for people who want to help out with. But that's not everything that it takes to run these organizations. The other thing is sometimes we don't do a real great job of reaching out to people to get them involved, even with things like degree work where we know we need lots of help. So I'll ask, really think about, have you asked your members to volunteer? Or have you expected them to come to you and ask you to do something? And have you been able to explain them exactly what you want them to help out with? Volunteer participation is a huge, huge concern for almost every single nonprofit. I'm struggling with this at work also because it is difficult because people are really busy and it is not an easy problem to solve. But I will say, first off, if you're not asking people for help, and if you cannot explain to them what you want help with, that's where you need to start. Well, you can get to the complicated stuff later. Start by asking and start by explaining what you need them to help with. And I'll bet in most cases, you'll at least see some improvement. Last item needs to be mentioned, unfortunately, is dues collection. With some exceptions, like life members, every year we ask our members for money for the privilege of being a member of our groups. And every year, a percentage of them do not pay their dues. Sometimes it's things they have no control over, job loss, health issues, stuff like that. But in most cases, this is our retention scorecard. This is when we learn how much do they care about their membership and how much are they willing to pay to continue being a member. For most of us, our dues just frankly aren't that expensive. Now, there are some exceptions, but for most and a lot, especially York Rites, they're not that much. So when they say they can't afford it, what they're really saying is they just don't see the value in giving us that dues money. Sometimes people will legitimately forget to send their dues, and they have the best intentions of paying. But it may also be that we are not a priority and we have not established ourselves as something important or as a priority. I mean, I realize some people do forget to pay their water bill, their gas bill, their electric bill, that kind of stuff. But I don't think as many people forget to pay that stuff as who seem to forget to pay their dues every single year. The hard part about all of this is the people collecting dues are typically your secretary and typically your really active officers who are putting hours and hours of volunteer time in. And so when someone doesn't pay their dues, and by doing so is indicating that they do not care about the group, it's really, really hard for us not to take it personally. Everything I've talked about is really all about an effort to show value in membership. So when the dues come due, the members feel like the money they spend is well worth it. And if they don't, and they don't pay, we've got to try to avoid taking it personally. We just got to keep going back and trying to provide a better and better membership experience so that they do see that value and they do pay in the future. We've just got to control what we can control, and sometimes you just can't get everybody to pay. In fact, you never can get everybody to pay, and just got to kind of let that go. But if we're not a good fit for them and membership doesn't interest them, we're just going to lose people. But we've got to do everything we can to provide that member experience. The other thing I want to point out quickly is that if you think people are going to pay their dues all at once off of one letter, you are kidding yourself. That is not how this works. So these statistics I took from a company called Marketing General. They survey all non-profit membership organizations, and I kept it to just individual membership groups. But these stats include also professional organizations, so groups that provide their members with continuing education they need for their licenses and stuff and benefits that help them make money, things that are valuable to them. And even with those type of groups included, the average organization will send out 5 emails, 2 letters, and make 1 phone call to collect dues. For the majority of them, dues collection is at least a 6-month process. And for many of them, even once they drop a member has expired, almost a quarter of them will continue to reach out to them indefinitely. So, if you are not starting dues collection by October, you might want to rethink that. If you stop trying to collect dues before March, you might want to rethink that also. If you are not using multiple channels, i.e. email, mail, text messaging, social media, phone call, etc., you might want to rethink that. If you are not sending something every month, you might want to rethink that. You don't want to hound them with stuff every day or even every week, but you do have to keep in front of them, and you have to expect that it's going to take a number of touches to get those dues paid. I hate this. It is super frustrating, but it is what it is. And unless you don't have any financial concerns, and what I mean by that is if you don't care how many dues you collect and you can just strip your membership down to just the most active and zealous members who always pay their dues on time. And even then, I don't know that that's true because I've got officers who don't always pay their dues promptly. You're going to have to put a lot of effort into dues collection. Sorry, that is unfortunately just the way it is. All right, so that is going to bring us to the end of the presentation. Please type any questions into the chat box, or if you're watching the recording of this, comments below. Anything I don't get to tonight, I'm going to use either develop future webinars or I'll answer in the comments below. Just to sum up real quick, similar to what I said at the end of my first webinar, we really need to try some different things out. I think communications is a huge problem for us. And it's getting harder and more complicated. There are just so many more options in terms of how we communicate, and people are getting more spread out with how they want us to communicate to them. So what we used to do won't work because the people want information to come from different places. And it's not simple because there isn't just one way that will reach everyone. We have to use all these different methods. I don't think that we're ever going to have a complete, comprehensive working communication plan that any group can just sit on or we can share out and everybody do the same thing, it's going to work. Because I think we're going to have to continually be changing and adapting how we get information out to our members. Everybody, every group, everyone needs to figure out a way to provide a great member experience. I see an awful lot of fake statistics and doom and gloom on Facebook about the younger generation and that they're not going to join fraternities and yada yada. That's just not true. The problem is not that they don't want to join. It's that they actually expect something for their dues. Our initiation ceremonies may be amazing. I love our degree work. But these newer members are not going to pay dues for 50 years because we gave them a good show when they joined, and that's it. If every group is just going to be a new degree and nothing more than that, then why would someone bother joining them all? Or if they join them all, why would they maintain their membership with everybody? Unfortunately, it's a mindset of, what have you done for me recently? There are just more and more things that we do that take up our time, and we as a fraternity are competing with all of it. Must-see TV, video games, sports, so many different hobbies, all of that stuff. We have to be a better use of their time than that if we want them to give us their time. Part of human nature is a desire for companionship. So while I agree that smartphones and social media aren't necessarily healthy and they're probably hurting people's communication skills, I don't believe we're raising these generations of people that don't want to interact with people and they just want to sit behind keyboards. That's just not true. The fraternity is valuable. We just have to do a better job of demonstrating that value. Likewise, I believe people by nature are inquisitive and they want knowledge and they want self-improvement, or at least the people that we want as members want that. But we have to ask ourselves, are we giving that to them? Can they get something comparable to what we offer somewhere else? Cheaper, easier, quicker. I still remain optimistic that if we can improve our member experience, and if we can give members something of value, that we will be very surprised at what our potential growth could be. Thank you very much for attending tonight's presentation. I'm going to look through this chat box a little bit and see if there's anything I can comment on, and if not, we will end the presentation. Well, thank you for everybody who at least posts this time. We have a nice chat going on. All righty. All right, well, thank you guys again for attending the webinar. Please share the recording with the people in your Rite, your lodge who may benefit from this. And y'all have a good evening. Thank you.